Minasan, yokoso to the Apprentice Abroad Japan channel. Last time we heard what my former teachers thought about my new apprenticeship. Today I'll be asking some of my friends what they think about my new apprenticeship with Taro. Question 1. What do you think of Taro taking me as an apprentice?
I think it's really, I'm really behind it. I think it's a great idea. From reading about, about other swordsmiths in Japan, I know that that's happened before. It's actually been a kind of a fantasy of mine one day to maybe go sweep the floor for some swordsmith, for a summer. But I think it's great because I think it's going to work to do a few things. But I think cultural understanding needs to be fostered. I mean, we like in any way we can, and finding different ways to do that through creative ways, positive ways, I think I'm all for. It just works toward better understanding of different cultures, and finding more things in common than not, which is something we really need right now. I think one thing that I'm very interested in is understanding the way things are done in different places. Understanding different techniques in different places, seeing the things that are the same and seeing the things that are done a little bit differently is a very interesting thing to me. I tell my students, we talk about, why do Japanese saws work on the pull stroke when, there's these little things, they do the same thing, but they do it a little bit differently. And finding that all out is very, very cool to me. So I think immersing yourself in another culture is going to be huge, would be huge for anybody, I think. By way of this common thing that you're going to be doing. So I'm very interested to see what happens afterwards. I want to hear about everything.
I think it's going to be a good opportunity for you, especially moving forward with your chosen profession, knife making, all those things. And you won't have to be stuck here with the rest of us. You have the opportunity to go, you should go.
There have been multiple foreigners, and some of them even have passed the exam. There's Yasha, someone who lives in Japan. He's Swedish. The problem Japanese have with foreigners is twofold. Japanese are very protective of their culture, so not all smiths like foreigners even knowing anything about it. And foreigners tend to be wishy-washy, so they kind of leave.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's actually quite interesting because one of the things which I found when I was over there was just how there's a certain amount of wariness among swordsmiths over there who I met to take on foreigners simply because of that extra added risk. They are investing their time and to some extent their money into their students. They don't ask for tuition, and some of them even give a stipend, not all of them, very few, but some of them give some money to their students. And obviously, with foreigners, that added risk of, either visas getting ruined or just them, getting homesick. And a lot of Westerners might decide that they want to go home one day, back to their home country to do work. And the thing is that while, if you pick up all the skills in Japan, you don't necessarily need to have, like Japanese smiths, the certification from the NDTHK, from the government, which means that they can, have their 3, 4, 5 years, learn all the skills they need, become proficient sword makers, but then not kind of go the whole distance and not do that kind of post-graduation sort of bowing and scraping for their sensei that would be expected generally. And so it's, there's less of payoff for them, so they just don't see it as worth it. And also the fact that you were able to find someone who was willing to take you on so quite quickly, because this is also one of the other things which I've heard so much about is, people having to spend, weeks and months, must have made one hell of an impression in that time, yeah.
Question 2. Do you think this project is important to have on YouTube?
I think so. All of the good things about it, just from what you will learn and what he'll learn from you, because teachers are learning all the time. That's huge. That's gold, right? But then when you put that out to the rest of the world, they understand how important it is. I think it's important because of that. I mean, I'm very much about the cultural understanding, and finding commonality. But also another important thing is, and this is not news to anybody that's probably going to be watching this, but the idea of craft, and that transcends borders and languages and cultures. I mean, in a way, maybe you could say it's a culture in itself, but that dedication to craft is important that people see, not just but to understand how things are made and that people make things, right? In a world that is very much going toward automation, some of us are heading in the other direction on purpose. But I think it's important to see that dedication to craft, and that you don't have to stay in one place, right? Like that's the thing that's transferable. And that's why you're there, I think.
I think it's important to be on YouTube because it's always good to share your journey, and it inspires other people to do something similar with whatever path that you're choosing. May be something similar to what they want to do, and seeing someone else do that is inspiring.
From the standpoint of documenting, it's certainly something that is worthy of being documented. Like, it's interesting to me. Again, I basically wanted to do the same thing years ago, but when I wanted to do it, I was still tied up with BKS, so it was annoying because I had signed obligations to do all kinds of stuff. It's like I'm no longer with BKS, so I don't have those obligations, and people who I used to consider before Tower came along are like old, so they don't like. I'm afraid that they'll croak before I complete it. They're afraid, like, oh, I can't, because it happens. So to Japanese apprentices very often. Now, the value for English-speaking persons to complete the training is to explain how actually difficult and refined the process is to the Western audience. Because I'm split on the way it is in Japan, because actually most Japanese people, if you walk around Tokyo, don't understand Japanese swords. Most people don't even think they're made anymore. People who understand it are very rare in Japan too. Actually, they might be even more rare than the people who appreciate them in the West. Like, so there might be one phenomenon, but the national character of Japanese is such that there's a great appreciation for artisanal things that are made the old school way, and paying extra money for that.
Oh, I think so. Like, because when you talk about that, like, here's this apprenticeship review, I think people will want to look at that kind of stuff. Like, you see the kind of stuff which is like popular on like Japanophile YouTube, and a lot of the stuff which people do like is that kind of foreigners, engaging with Japan in interesting ways, and sort of Japan opening up a little bit. It's, for better or for worse, like going to Japan and sort of even moving there, it's like one of these like big dreams. Therefore, it's quite an aspirational thing to be able to see that, and to be able to see that sort of in as it happens on YouTube. That's like a really cool thing, and then be able to combine that with this sort of educational aspect as well. I think that's just like, it's just valuable in general. I think just be able to open up this side of the sword world, because there's so much information like readily available in the West, unless you really go looking for it, about sort of the artistic side, the traditional side of Japanese swords. Like, all you get is like fantastical, like massive Nordachi or whatever in like video games or movies and anime and so on. And it's like people have this idea of like the sword of this kind of like mythical, unbreakable thing, when it's just, it's a sword, a very good sword, but it's still a sword. What's more interesting than the fact that it can cut stuff is that it's this art object, and if you guys can open that up to the world.
Question 3. What do you think people will find interesting?
I think the people will find interesting is that he's willing to give you all of his time, essentially, or a large chunk of his time to learning, making knives. And to some people that's crazy. Like, why wouldn't he get an office job, or why wouldn't, how's he going to financially deal with this and blah, blah, blah. But, passing on of knowledge is important. So I think people find it interesting even when I did my apprenticeship.
There'll be things there for a lot of different people. Some people will definitely focus, they'll be there just for the swordsmithing. Some people will be there for the whole thing, like everything that they can get out of it. They'll be there for things that they'll be getting things out of it they didn't know they were going to get, I'm sure. And then some people will be there, for the cultural stuff. But I mean, there's probably things going on there that I don't even understand that are going to be happening, because I've never, I've only traveled abroad, not all that many times, but a few times. I will say that there are more countries now. The first few times was to the UK. basically speak the same language. It's interesting going to another country where you're having to struggle with language. I'll tell you one thing. Some of the terminology, when I started practicing martial arts, you know, like when you don't speak another language, some of the things that the language, like it sounds exotic, right? You know, this term in Kendo, whatever the term may be, it's like, oh, I wonder what that means. Does that have some kind of, no, it's like left foot, do this, you know, it's like, it's just Japanese, right? It's not. So I think one of the things that you're going to be doing is demystifying some things, right? You're going to be uncovering some things. Like, it's science. You're going to be doing science, right? Applied science. And I think that's another great thing. Like, people are going to see, again, going back to the handmade thing, like, this is something that's been happening for thousands of years, slightly different now, different in different places again. But yeah, I think that for me, it'll be the cultural stuff and the pure metalworking stuff too. It's like, but I think if I had to like put myself in the shoes of my students, it'll be the sword making.
Question 4. What would you personally like to see from the channel?
From your guys' YouTube channel, I would like to see your journey in getting to the apprenticeship, doing the apprenticeship, how life is while you're there, and seeing it kind of as a progressive story, I think would be the most interesting to me. Being like, how do I fill out all this freaking paperwork? To like, I'm finally in Japan and it sucks less here because there aren't that many Americans. And then maybe like a lot of Taro's, like, or not a lot, but some of Taro's like family life stuff and like what he does on a daily basis is really interesting that you could integrate into a storyline, I think, really easily.
So I think there's an important balance to be made there. Definitely like the educational stuff around swords and just like looking at the history of swords, how their place in Japanese society, like both before now but also now, because like there is still, beyond the collectors, there is like a place for them in society around some ceremonies and weddings and so on. So like learning more about that kind of stuff, and like I would say like techniques, but then again, there's this sort of an issue that is there's an undercurrent there of like people who see, I don't know, like learn about polishing or learn about smithing or whatever, think that they can do it, watch a few videos and then try and do it. And there was a real possibility of this guy effectively ruining forever a historical artifact, technical videos, or like, telling people like how to make a hammer-on, how to make oroshigane, how to like set up your own forge, especially if it gets like super popular. I mean, you've seen obviously less important than destroying historical artifacts, but you've seen, obviously, as you know, that the effects of things like Forged in Fire and Alex Steel, hundreds, thousands of people who've seen this and decided they're going to become smiths, but their only idea of smithing is blade smithing, knife smithing, sword smithing. And then they make this stuff, not only expect that they could sell it, but that it's going to be as good as everyone else's, and sort of don't open their eyes to the possibilities elsewhere, beyond the sheer fact of making them, the artistry behind it. And I think that's, for example, like why people like Ilya on Man at Arms is so good, or rather that works, what he's been doing on there. Like when he did the Katana video recently, like a few months ago, he did that video explaining more of the philosophy and the art behind it. Obviously he was also making a cool weapon that he could then slash stuff up with. But the point is he used that as a way of teaching people kind of like the right way, as it were, of thinking about swords. And I think that's what I'd like to see, like a nice balance, making it sort of clear and responsible in how you teach about swords. Because if a lot of people, if you get big, if you get like 100,000 subs, 200,000 subs, million subs, whatever, fingers crossed, in which case they kind of need to be set straight from the beginning. I'd like to see practical stuff. I'd like to see historical stuff. Just give me everything. Just feed the hunger.
100% the cultural aspect, because the internal culture of the apprenticeship tradition is not entirely well known in Japan itself to other people, because you go to Yokaisha or you go to Yoshigoto and like that's it. It's different. When you go for a company, it's not apprenticeship. Like that's where you stay, and it's not hands-on. It's office culture. It's different. So something that is, the anthropology of the apprenticeship tradition is fairly valuable. The anthropology of sword making is fairly interesting to me personally, because that's the important stuff. Like a hot metal being smashed, it's not my thing. Like if I can do stuff without like create a way where I don't have to heat up the metal and everything is quiet, I do it. What I'm most interested in is the most conservative way, because I can liberalize. You get the most traditional, the most strict interpretation of the craft, but being as strict, it's like making the edge straight. Like that's the hard part. So Guhor on a long blade, it seems boring, but it's the hardest thing to do. You can introduce innovation, whatever you think is innovation, excitement into it as much as you want, but it's not like striving for the hardest, most conservative thing is usually the best solution and the best tactic for me, and that's what I'm interested in.
Question 5. What struggles do you think I'll encounter on my journey?
Part about it. It may be being away from home, and the travel back home may be the hardest part. I mean, I think from what I gather, you have enough of a grasp on language and understanding of culture that it's not any kind of, that's not a big deal. It'll be a little bit of adjustment, probably not much more than it would be for you to move from Memphis to LA or something, Well, here's the most important thing is the will, right? Like I tell my students that if they walk out of my class and they decide to take, whatever they're learning, they take it further. The most important thing they walk out is the will to do it, right? Everything else comes more easily if you have the will to do it, if you're determined to do it. So I guess, I don't know. I guess I can't see it being very hard for you just to be in Japan. You may miss your family. I think may be the hardest part, but I'm sure they'll probably come and visit you or you'll visit them from time to time. I've lived myself a long time away from most of my family, so that's something I'm used to. But I also one thing I don't know is I don't want to pry too much because, but I pay like a way, how will you, yours will be different than what I went through, obviously, very different. But are you going to be, well, you're just not going to be able to do it if you can't survive, right? So I'm sure Taro's making sure that that's going to happen. Being able to sacrifice, you may not be a person that wants to make a lot of money in your life. And I totally get that. I'm not either. And so that may not be that difficult for you. But I guess if it's something like at some point in your life, you want to be making more money, it may be, you may have to wait for that. Because I know Taro is who he is. If I didn't know who Taro was, I probably would be like, are you going to be able to accept doing things that you might think are below you? Like when I tell students, you're going to go into an apprenticeship, you know what your most important tool is? It's a broom. In apprentices in general, is you have to kind of one point know a few things, or you have to but you have to have common sense, or you should develop it. But also, you can't go out and it takes time to get to where you want to be, and you have to be patient and sometimes accept the dirty jobs to do it. And some people just want to jump right in and be masters right away at whatever they're doing, and it takes a while to get there. Like just maintaining patience might be a difficult thing, but it might be a difficult thing, but I don't think so.
Just cultural shock after a while. But you've already spent a considerable amount of time there. Being able to financially support yourself, I think that's the only difficulty. And prioritizing. It's hard in another country to prioritize what you're still there to learn. I don't think it'll be an issue.
There's an inherent problem because this is a highly artistic medium. I know for a fact, it's empirically proven that I have a talent, like as an artist, so on and so forth. It might end up being the case that you will find yourself like the most difficult, the most heartbreaking thing that you are in danger of is actually training yourself to see the things and realizing that you are from birth incapable of them because you simply do not have the right talent, in the same as training to be an opera singer and then realizing that you just do not have the vocal cords for it. That's it. And but being so far enough, because it's not like singing. With singing, you can kind of tell from the beginning. You're given all this knowledge, how to appraise it, how to value it, and realizing that you just don't have what it takes. But that would be the most dangerous thing that you are like threatened by.
Okay. You personally, time and money. How to like shoot and edit videos, how to work the YouTube algorithm and stuff like that. You know, all that kind of like videography stuff, which is just boring but has to be done. But also there's the stuff like learning how to deal with the community. So like one of the things we're saying is, you know, especially when you first get a big video, you might wake up in the morning and find like you got like a couple of hundred notifications on YouTube. And you will spend like days and days going through the notifications, responding to people in the comments, you know, reading every comment, and then getting really depressed. And it's just learning to like ignore the trolls. And like, you know, sure, you'll engage with like, or maybe on the first day with the first like 20 like commenters, because they are probably the people who are subscribed to you, who's keeping them on board is kind of what matters. But then after that, you just kind of like, okay, maybe after 2 days, just, you know, you just leave it, you know. And it's kind of like managing your persona, managing the community, managing like all these aspects of your life, and then cramming it into something which somehow works.
That's it from some of my friends. What do you think about what was said? Did anything surprise you? Next time, you will hear from the Metal Museum, where we held Taro's masterclass and his lecture when he came to Memphis. As you can see, there is a new setup. I have new equipment, so bear with me while I figure out what works best for this YouTube channel, and in the future, things may change. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. Kyoskete.